Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of the Jason's podcast series for 2024 with myself, Jason Noble, here in a very gloomy looking London at the beginning of February, and my counterpart over in the States. Say hello, Jason.
Hello, Jason.
We are super excited today. It's our first one of 2024, as we said. We've got a guest. This is an area that we've spoken about previously in a podcast, but not into the same level of detail. And I think it's something that is really super topical right now, particularly looking at things like how AI can help. But we're going to talk about customer education and the future of customer education, and all the greatness that goes with that. It's a huge topic, but this is our first focus one on this. And I want to welcome our very special guest, Vicky Kennedy. Welcome, Vicky.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, excited to be here.
Really
Honored to be
looking
your
forward to
first
this.
guest.
Absolutely.
Here.
Vicky, just for our listeners who don't know, Vicky's the founder of Ectus. She's been in the tech industry for a good while. I think she pivoted in here in about 2012, I think it was, following a really solid career in education herself. So understanding before looking at tech and what tech education is, what education really is about. She's worked with Meta, where I think her love of education and tech kind of came together. Then worked for Amazon, where she led strategy and execution of kind of global advertisement certifications. And then she set up Ectus, which is a startup on a mission to revolutionize the way companies use education to achieve business results. And I love this bit, but disrupt the traditional legacy education space. And I think that's something that tech is doing to all the spaces. I think it's much needed in the education space. Some big changes. And you've been using data analytics, a combination of different frameworks, really to show how to get an ROI, not just from education, but from those services. So really, really super excited. Vicky, welcome. How are you? And how's the start of 2024 been for you?
Yeah, thank you. And that was I feel like I'm going to steal that intro because I can never get my own elevator pitch like that succinct. So thank you for that. Yeah, the year starting off really great. As you said, I launched this business towards the end of last year. So it's been all the chaos of figuring out how to run my own thing, but also the excitement of that. So definitely, yeah, it's going well.
How could you, in your own words, tell us about your journey to Ectus? So you've got working with organizations like Meta, like Amazon. These are huge organizations established. Everyone knows of them. Your background with higher education, I thought, puts you in a really neat kind of position. But what was your vision with Ectus, and how do you see the direction?
Yeah, I did work at those larger companies. That was where I got some really great exposure working in the enterprise environment and really just seeing all the different perspectives of how education is thought of in businesses of that size and how it's leveraged. I did work for a couple other smaller SaaS companies since leaving Amazon before launching Ectus, and especially in one of those positions, I worked with an LMS that was heavily focused on the customer education space and really saw this trend of businesses that were looking to leverage education and to get value from it. But it's a very sort of nascent field. Even though it's been around for a few years now, we've been talking more about it. We're talking more about ROI from it, but it still is something that doesn't have a lot of form, and it lacks the same, I think, value and oomph that some of the other functional areas get, like marketing, for example. Marketing is typically where you get the investments because it's clear to understand what you're getting from your marketing initiatives. And I'm sure there's marketers that may argue with me on that and say that they can't get investments. But it's one of the ones that it's understood more by executive leadership, right? And like sales initiatives are understood more, obviously product initiatives. And the education initiatives are just not as understood. It's not clear what you're actually doing. Is it just content? Is it webinars? What is it that actually is driving the business? And so all of that just really motivated me to want to help elevate this more because I'm very passionate over education done the right way and getting results from that. So that was really it. I also have always had the entrepreneurial drive. My father ran his own business, and it's just like in my DNA. So it's one of those things where it's never good timing. My wife just started grad school, so I'm like, yeah, why not now? Let's why don't I just jump fully in and do it? But yeah, that's where it happened. I just really found the passion to help other people do this. And that's really the
That
mission.
that passion is so important. That clearly comes across. And
Yeah.
wanting, you said, how do you do education? And I think that background you've got puts you in a really strong position. I some years ago, when you say LMS, I worked with a big provider and we sold consultancy services and we're selling LMS solutions, one of the organizations that we dealt with. And that was some years ago. But how has customer education evolved and developed over the last 20 years? Has it developed? And what do you see as some of the big challenges that we've got today?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, it used to just be called training, customer training, product training. And that's what I did. Like when I pivoted to the tech industry 12 years ago now, it was just training. And you're basically like showing your customers how the product works or how your solution works. And it was very much not educators that were in that space. They were either just account managers or product people, and they were doing demos. And that's what it was. It was customer training. And then you start to see a little bit more of an emphasis on scaling that, recording the training and putting that online, like some documents and supporting things along that way. And I don't know exactly what time period it started to shift to be something that was more formal, but you saw other businesses doing things like certifications, and that's what I was brought on for Amazon to do, the advertising certification. So you start to see more of that, and typically in larger companies doing things that were more of a formal kind of training platform. And really fast forwarding, what we see now are more companies that have a dedicated customer education academy, university, learning center, whatever it is, but it's more emphasis on the scalability and the repeatability of having this on demand. Over the years, we went from completely non-educators doing this kind of training to now having people that are instructional designers typically and have more of a thought to the learning experience. So we're bringing that more into it. There's still quite a large room to grow, which I may get into talking about in this, but it has become more of a formal like education initiative where people actually have more and more of that background and they're brought on to do these at scale.
I think, like you
Yeah.
say, that it is training. That's exactly what we used to call it, and it used to
Yeah.
almost be dumbed down massively. How do you, to you, what is customer education then? And I guess a bigger question is, why do we need it? If the product works and does the job, surely you don't need training. I mean, we've all got apps on our phones that we don't get training on. What is it
Right.
that real customer education is all about?
Oh, I love that question. And so this may be, I don't know, controversial. I'll have a lot of hate mail from this, but you don't always need it if you have a product that's simple enough where it is point and click. There are some
The
things
big
where
if.
you don't, there are, to be honest, there are simple products, simple apps that you don't need to invest a whole lot into a formal education. But a lot of, especially the SaaS, a lot of the new SaaS businesses are coming out there, and especially the larger technology companies, that's not the case. And it's not the case of just a complex product, but it's really about the foundational, even industry knowledge that you need to get the most value out of that product. And that's something where we have to shift. So even talking about your last question, when we think about how customer education started, it was just training on point and click, how to use the software or how to use the app.
Yeah.
But now we move more into actually like branching out and teaching things like industry skills, like project management skills, if you're a project management platform, or financial planning skills, if you're a financial app. One of the great examples is actually Whole Foods, which is not in technology, as you might know, but Whole Foods, which I'm not sure if it's a global business, but
Yep, it's over here. We've got it.
okay, yeah. So it's the organic food chain. And they did a customer education, which was really about focusing on helping the public understand the importance of organic foods. And that was like just revolutionary, where you build credibility as an industry expert in your area. And it starts to improve not just your lead generation, your prospect base, but also just the value that your customers are getting from your products or services. Yeah, there are some apps, there's some things where it is simple enough. You don't need to necessarily go into a huge thing. But for many apps, especially the ones and businesses that are being innovative and paving the way, there's nothing like them before. So you have to have some level of education just to even understand, like before you get into the product, like to just be thinking about the product.
Wow, I think that's just so awesome to hear too, like expanding beyond the point and click usage and navigating the app. Because I see more and more organizations going down that path. I'm curious though, how do you, if you're working with a SaaS company that has never done this before, has never really had instructional designers and doesn't fully understand why it's important to pivot that way, or why they should do content beyond their application, how do you lay out a vision for them of what this is and why it's worthwhile and frankly justify the investment in it?
Yeah. So the first thing that I always start with is the business problem or opportunity. Like when we think about
Hmm.
launching an education initiative, I always talk about education as a strategy. It is a strategy. It shouldn't just be done to do it. You don't want to just throw a bunch of content on there so you can check that box and say we have a customer academy, but thinking about what is the purpose of that academy. So if I'm talking to someone in customer success, for example, there could be an opportunity to improve retention. Maybe they're seeing a churn problem, and that's pretty typical, or even just accelerating time to value, scaling up an onboarding to make sure that customers are reaching that aha moment within the given time. So you want to target it to that problem or opportunity that you're seeing. And also that could be same thing on the lead generation side if you're on the marketing side. So that's the first thing, is let's take a look at what we could use education as a strategy for. So when we think about business strategy in general, there's going to be a variety of ways that you might tackle something like a customer retention problem. And education is likely to be one of those ways. And then you have to work backwards to understand where's the potential knowledge gap or skills gap that is hindering the customers from being able to get that full value. And you start building education that targets that. And if you can get your customers to achieve the outcomes, it's going to enable them to then see the value and get the value out of your products. That's when you start connecting those dots, and you can have real clarity in using this education as a strategy to achieve that specific business goal.
How do you, as someone in customer education, there's a big overlap. We talked about marketing earlier. There's a big overlap with marketing. Some of this might come under marketing's remit. How do you, as a business leader or a founder, how do you go about ensuring that this customer education program, that you give it priority? Because you've got so many other challenges and priorities today. How do you, and so much other stuff for people to focus on, how do you, as a business leader, how do you go about making sure that you are giving this the right priority? How can we help business leaders?
Yeah, I think just going back to business strategy in general, if you're at the C level, you're looking at all the different types of initiatives that your company can realistically prioritize and focus on to achieve that North Star. So if you do have something like retention and it's a big enough problem that you want to prioritize investment in, then that's how you think about it. Can we use education to invest in this area to drive that needle? And another business may not be seeing much of a retention problem, and maybe they have to invest that in other areas. So that's why I always want to be realistic with, I'm never someone that's do it for the sake of doing it, but do it if it makes sense, and do it if the problem is there and we can see that measurable result. So if as a business leader, you're able to see all this, you're able to see like what the problems are and what the best strategies are, because education is going to be one of the clearer strategies, or I should say most effective strategies to drive the needle, like retention and reducing churn. Then you can prioritize your headcount that way and just have at least one dedicated headcount that owns that, because that's maybe that's where you're getting with that question. But if there's not at least an owner for this, then it's something that's not going to happen with any kind of strategy, and it might happen with sort of spaghetti on the wall haphazardness.
Where does that ownership sit? What would your kind of recommendation? What's best practice? Where does customer education sit?
My soapbox on this is that because education is it's a strategy. So like customer education has become something that's sitting more and more under customer success, which I understand. And I think that there's not a problem with there being like customer education within the customer success department, but there are other ways that education drives value in a business. When we look at the product education specifically, so talking again about in the marketing side, it is something that is definitely used to or can be used to drive lead generation. Even on the product side, it can be used under the product team to drive product adoption. So it has reach beyond just customer success. So in an ideal scenario, when I worked at one of the smaller companies I worked at, I started the education department and brought all education initiatives under me. So there was like a holistic approach to education as it went out across these different strategic initiatives. Now I've gotten more realistic and understand that businesses are probably not going to have the VP of education everywhere, although some do. And I hope that we can get more case studies for how that works. But even if you do have initiatives like somebody owning customer education in the customer department, and somebody owning like partner enablement maybe it's under marketing or it's under a partner department, the second best thing is to at least have a holistic strategy where those people are working together. I actually like something called the organizational hierarchy, or it's not hierarchy, it's organizational, what am I saying? It's a circular organizational structure is what I'm saying. And so unlike the traditional hierarchy of this person reports to this person who reports to this person, it's more of a circle where you have working groups together. So even if you have someone in CS and someone in marketing and someone in product, there's a working group where they're approaching education from a holistic strategy.
I love it. You for me, it's not training. That's a light bulb moment. This isn't training. Tie this into what we're trying to do with our products. Love it. Sorry, Jace.
Yeah, no, all good. Becky, I'm curious because one of the things, obviously, you said improving the ROI and the value of it and all that stuff. It seems like there's a certain amount of lead time required to build your team, build your department, build your content, get customers to consume it, and then have those aha moments. For organizations that are realizing that they need more of a customer education approach, what are some realistic timeframes it would take to get there and resource loads? Because one of the things I've seen a lot of organizations is they half-ass it. We'll throw a few resources at it with usually who we have. We'll expect too much way too soon, and then when we don't this miracle cure come up right away, then we cut it all and go back to doing something else. So what is a realistic investment time frame and return period for an organization that's trying to set this up for the first time?
Yeah. There's definitely a balance. If you, and I should preface this by saying I'm a very big believer in agile, like iterative development. I have a product background as well, and I'm not here to say make it all perfect before you launch. If you do, however, just throw something out there and get too scrappy with it just to see, then you actually end up shooting yourself in the foot, because education is not something that can be half-assed,
Right.
basically, because essentially you're trying to move the needle and get outcomes from it. So you do have to find that balance where you put something out there purposeful. Now, the way you could do that in an iterative way quickly is you get real clear and real targeted on what that problem is you want to solve. So one of the easier ones is onboarding and making sure that you're improving or accelerating that time to value. You can do that with just a few modules. Get real clear on what those key things are that your customers need, build those modules, get them online, and even have a test group of clients go
Mhm.
through that. You can realistically get that online in 90 days or less, depending on how complex your product or solution is. So about 90 days, give or take, to get some information out there, and then another 90 days to see and measure the results of that, to see are people engaging in it, completing
Yep.
it, learning what they need to. It's realistically 3 to 6 months to get something meaningful, but to get at least a test out there to know that this is actually something that you could drive your business and you can invest further in.
That's great. So, but when you're actually going to build out the team to do this, what are some of the key skills that you're looking for in the people that would be really effective as customer educators?
Yeah, I just wrote an article on that one. I love that question. It's a very interesting skill set, because you do need the education domain expertise from the sense of understanding curriculum and understanding outcomes. This is the very
Mhm.
unique thing about education content as opposed to other types of content that you have in a business, is that it's about the outcomes of the education, or it should be. So oftentimes we see an over reliance on just engagement and getting people to like look at a course, so if it's a video
Yep.
course or enroll in it, but we're really trying to drive engagement. So there has to be some sense of educational expertise, understanding what learning objectives are and how that ladders up to bigger goals. But you don't want to over-index on someone that like just has that background, because you have to marry that with the business acumen. It's all about driving that business. So it's a very unique skill set, and not the easiest one to hire, because it's somebody that needs to have basically the program development, business acumen, plus that education, and can see it from a higher business perspective, but also has the experience, especially if it's a smaller company. You want to hire someone that can get in there and build some stuff to get that test
Mhm.
out. So if we go back to the last question, being able to put a test out there in 90 days, you want someone that can do that. So a little bit of a unicorn, but they are out there. There's quite a large-ish community of customer education experts now, but it's definitely an interesting sort of skill set to find.
How do you balance the need for your products are always growing and changing and probably accelerating that? There is still a need for some training. So how do you get it right? Because you can't, what if the product isn't easy to use and you're trying to convince your customers about how to drive value from it, how to reduce that time to value, but they can't use it. They don't know how to use it. So how do you find the balance with what you're ultimately trying to do with customer education, drive value, with the need to do some training? So how do you get the balance there? Or is there always a need for the two? So to be actually doing some, what we've historically called technical training,
I
but
see.
then at the same time mix that in with, this is how you do it, this is why you do it, and this is what you do to get the value. If that makes sense?
I think basically what we're talking about though is the competencies that someone needs to get value, which includes actually having to use the product. So we're
Mhm.
not talking about just the whys. So I can give an example. You mentioned I worked at Amazon. So with Amazon, I specifically worked on the advertising products. And so there's twofold. There's understanding advertising concepts. So there's understanding why you want to set up campaigns a certain way, why you want to pull the reports a certain way. So there's all that that's your sort of more traditional customer education. And then of course there is how do I actually click and set up the
Yep.
campaign? How do I go in there and what does this particular setting mean and whatnot? And in a skilled educator is going to understand how to do that from a conceptual point of view, but then some of it is just going to be even more specifically in product documentation. You don't have to go into every single, this button means this and this button means that in a training, because you're
Mhm.
gonna be talking more about the concept so that people can get in there and know what they're trying to set up, and then they figure out how to do the navigation. So it's not really like a kind of a simple cast answer I can give you to that one. It's really
Right.
kind of
But
case by case. But
it's a balance, isn't it? It's getting the balance right, because I think if you take them on that journey, then you will naturally guide them through, this is how you do it.
Exactly. And one of the examples that I give, it's a balance. It's also really understanding the difference between in the moment documentation and help versus proactive conceptual education, and then more just like information pulling, like when you're trying to do something and get unstuck. One of the examples that I give is if you're learning to drive a car for the first time, you don't open up a car owner's manual and start reading through and to learn how to drive a car,
Mhm.
right? But at the same, most people wouldn't do that. And at the same time, if you are obviously an experienced car driver and you get a new car, you're not going to go take a course to learn which type of
Yeah.
gas to put in your car, right? So it's like both of them are information. One you would take a driver's ed course and one you would reference the manual, but for very different reasons at very different times, very different like personas. So a big part of this is really understanding your personas, understanding the purpose of education. It's not a one size fits all. When we talk about customer education, we're not talking about it looks like this in every scenario. It's very unique to the product, unique to the audience, unique to the business goals. And that's really why it requires someone with that kind of expertise to build.
How do you, what one question I'd love to hear from you, what's next in customer education? Where it has, like we say, started off as training, it's evolved into something much more value. But where do
Yeah.
you see it growing? Are people investing the right amount? Are they building the right teams? What's next?
So I can answer that from what I'm seeing, and I can answer that from what I'm pushing for.
Oh, please.
Because what I'm pushing for is that we take it to that next level where it becomes the value driver and we see ROI. And I do have optimism that is like that narrative has been increasing over the last few years. I do see others besides myself who are pushing for ROI. So I do see this as becoming more of a recognized value driver, moving it from the cost center to a revenue driver. That's one of the big conversations that people are having around this, and really leveraging it more so than the sort of afterthought that we've seen. So I do see it progressing that way. Some of the other trends that we're seeing, there's a big trend around community and bringing that in, which I find a little funny because social learning has been around for many years and it's like becoming the trend now and everyone's talking about adding it as part of your education arsenal, which is great. So I think that we're going to see more of a combination between your more traditional LMS courses and community. And then another area that I think is going to change is we spun from the very informal, everyone's just doing their own customer training, to something that was a little more like scaled up and those recorded webinar type thing, to something that was more formal LMS, here's your courses, come and take them. And now I think we need to move that into something that's more bringing in that social piece, but really meeting the customers where they are and not being so rigid in that format of an LMS, but really like more of where the customer is in the app, in their other parts of their customer journey. So we're seeing more emphasis on that as well.
I
Wow,
think
Of course,
that's
AI.
awesome.
it's so exciting. It really is. This has been eye-opening. It really has. Look, Vicky, thank you so much. One thing we like to give all our guests, kind of as a last question, is what we call our bold challenge question.
Oh
The
boy.
one for you, and this is what it's an action item. So what can business and product leaders, what's the one thing that they could do today to ensure that customer education is done properly and for their customers in the right way? So if you were to pin one thing.
To make sure it's done properly is
Yep.
to make sure you have the right skill set owning it. Because the number one thing is when it's just given to somebody that doesn't have any of that background and they're trying to figure it out, which I will say power to the people that do that. I'm not saying you can't become successful with that, but at least make sure that those people are empowered with the right resources,
Right.
either working with consultants or working with some other expertise to help upskill them. Because if it's given to some team as an afterthought, you're not gonna see the value from it. So if we want to see value from it, we want to make sure that the right resources are put on it when it's not just something that's being done as a checkbox.
I love that. That's just pretty. That kind of sums it all up. This isn't an afterthought. You have to invest in this. There's massive value for this from customers, for your product. This helps do the essence of what you're trying to do with your product. Vicky, this has been really eye-opening for me. I like to think I understand customer education, but you've pushed me in a different direction. This is really good. It's going to make me rethink about this. But a big thank you. As always, please, we'd like you to, if there is a link or anything that you can give for our listeners so they can reach out to you, give us a few lines now just so that people can know who you are and how
Yeah, shameless plug.
Yeah, I'll take a
That's the
shameless
word
plug.
I was
Thank
looking
you. Thanks. Yeah, so my business is called Ectus, ECHTUS. It comes from the word ect, which means authentic. And you can find me at ectus.com. Basically, I specialize in empowering businesses to do this very thing. So either consultative or even embedding managed services, upskilling teams, basically end-to-end solutions to do this right. And the goal is really to help empower the business to do it themselves. So I'm not an agency, really just helping install this from the ground floor, and very excited to do that for anyone interested.
This is
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Vicky. Really appreciate your time.
Great conversation. I am sure so many people are going to be looking out for this, and you can really help people. Vicky, thank you again. This has been a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Had a lot of fun.